I mean, the bottom line is this is a war that no Russian wants to fight, apart from a few ultra-nationalist armchair generals who support Vladimir Putin. And the war is going very badly for the Kremlin. On top of the measures that you just mentioned, Putin has also sacked one of the senior generals responsible for prosecuting this war. So, I mean, things are going very, very badly. And the mobilization call that he announced last week has gone down very badly with the Russian people. You've seen this mass exodus of young people trying to leave the country, voting with their feet, you might say. You've seen the mass demonstrations. So, I mean, you almost feel that the whole Putin era is starting to collapse.
Make him more dangerous.
Well, that's the concern, Stephen. And of course, you know, whenever he's in trouble, and we've seen this since the start of the conflict back in February this year, whenever he feels under pressure, he starts talking about Russia's nuclear arsenal. And let us not forget that Russia does have the world's largest nuclear weapons arsenal. But there are constraints on that. Putin himself does not solely control these weapons. There's a whole structure in the security infrastructure in Russia and the Russian Federation that is involved with any decision-making on the use of nuclear weapons. And again, we've heard this week that the Biden administration has been sending coded messages through to the Kremlin saying, if you go anywhere near your nuclear arsenal with regard to the Ukraine conflict, there will be consequences. So, you know, I think this is just an enormous game of bluff by Putin to save his skin. But yes, you're right, Stephen. He is cornered, and a cornered guy is a dangerous guy.
I mean, it's dangerous all round, isn't it? Because meanwhile, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, is saying to those who are living in those areas that Russia now claims are, frankly, Russian, to the Ukrainians, if they get conscripted, if they are forced to join up and join the Russian forces, they should do so, but sabotage from within.
Well, that's quite a neat idea. As I said at the start, I mean, this is a war that no Russians want to fight, which is why they're doing so badly. We've seen the images around Kharkiv of Russian soldiers deserting their positions, deserting state-of-the-art tanks. I mean, this is a complete rout. And you can mobilize people, you can give them 2 weeks basic training and send them down the line as cannon fodder, but they can still refuse to pick up their guns. And the other thing Zelensky said is, why don't you defect? Come to Ukraine, we'll look after you. And we all know that Ukraine and Russia have very close family and cultural links. So a lot of these Russian soldiers might feel far more at home living in Ukraine than they do in Putin's Russia.
Do you think, in terms of what we're seeing within Russia at the moment and the number of protests that have been taking place, is there enough dissent growing that it could have an impact on what Putin is able to do?
I think the answer to that, Stephen, is yes. I think there comes a point where even when you have state-controlled media, state-controlled newspapers, you've crushed all the opposition, the message still gets through. And clearly, the fact that all these young Russians are fleeing the country the moment the mobilization is announced is they know the war is not going well. They know that this is an unjust war, that their president is losing the plot. And this will filter through. I think the key thing to watch myself is how the oligarchs respond. The oligarchs control a lot of Russia's wealth. They are allowed to be very wealthy by Putin so long as they support him. But they are losing a fortune. We've seen Roman Abramovich get involved with the negotiations last week to get the British captives released. Well, he's doing that because he's lost so much money, as have all the other oligarchs. And there will come a point where they say, well, this, even though this guy is ruthless and we might end up in Siberia or worse, falling out a hospital window, seems to be the favoured treatment for dissidents at the moment in Moscow. But there will come a point when the people with influence inside the Kremlin will turn on them will turn on him. And this is why whenever you see him now, he's at a very long table, sitting a very long way away from anybody else.
How could it end? Even if it did, and hopefully it would end with Ukraine winning and Russia having to back off, how would that look? How would it be for Putin or anyone else in the Kremlin?
Well, I think Russia is facing a very long winter in the diplomatic wilderness because they're not going to win this war, Anne. That's number one. They cannot win this war. So the question now is how much territory, how many gains do the Ukrainians make before the war ends? Well, the war could drag on for a very long time. There are wars all over the world that have been going on for years. Just look at Yemen, for example, or something like that. So, I mean, there's no immediate prospect of the war ending. But as I said, Russia can't win. When it is over, there are going to be war crimes allegations against Putin, the people around Putin, the senior members of the Russian military, and the economic isolation of Russia will continue for a very long time. Nobody's going to want to buy its oil or its gas. The only customers will be countries like China and India, which will buy it on the cheap. So Russia's going to be bankrupt. So my fear, though, and this is something that Kremlinologists are watching very closely, that if Putin does go, the one fear is that you get another ultra-nationalist Russian hardman running the country and not a freedom-loving Democrat that the West would like to see in power in Russia.
Fascinating stuff. It's always good to talk to you, Con. Thank you very much indeed.